episode of A Pair of Bookends is sponsored by Dear Green Reads. They create handmade book sleeves and gift boxes for all your bookish needs. They also support other independent businesses by sourcing designs for their fabrics from them and by collaborating with small businesses to find items that complement their products. Head to our Instagram at A Pair of Bookends Pod for an exciting giveaway.
Welcome to A Pair of Bookends, the book club you can carry anywhere. We are your hosts and hopefully your new bookish pals. I'm Hannah MacDonald.
And I'm Lydia Clare.
On today's episode, we'll be discussing the books that have shaped us, from books we grew up reading to our current favourite authors. We'd love to hear your answers to the questions we'll be asking today, so please do DM us at A Pair of Bookends Pod or email us at apairofbookendspod@gmail.com. But before we get started, Lydia, what are you currently reading?
So I am currently reading This One Sky Day by Leone Ross, right? And I have had it on my TBR shelf for, since before Christmas, definitely.
Really?
Yeah. Since before I knew it was for the Women's Prize. And it's a gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous edition. Sprayed edges, hello.
It is actually stunning.
Yeah, it's beautiful. But I've been put off from reading it because it's a bit fantastical. So it's set on an island.
See, I didn't know this.
Yeah, so I knew nothing about it. And then I bought it for the cover, guys. Sorry.
I mean, who wouldn't?
Who wouldn't?
The cover, the sprayed edges,
it's
stunning.
But yeah, so I bought it on a whim, like this is a gorgeous book, I need it in my life, and didn't know what it was about. And then I watched, I think it was Savage Reads, and he explained a little bit of the book, and I was like, oh, okay, so I've bought some kind of like fantastical fiction thing, and I thought, it's not usually my vibe, but I thought, go for it. And anyway, it's been sat on my shelf, sat there. And then when the Women's Prize long list came out and I saw it, I was like, well,
Now's your time.
I've already got it,
Now's
right?
your time.
So picked it up, started reading it. It does take, I'd say, maybe 25 to 30 pages to get your head around what the heck is going on, right? They're on this island. I'm not giving much away here, but it's set on an island, a bit like maybe like Barbados or somewhere in the Caribbean, Jamaica, places like that, you know,
right.
like an archipelago kind of place. And everyone has a magical gift.
Oh, okay.
And the magical gifts are crazy. Like some girl, her lungs are on the outside of her body. Some people have extra arms. Some people can season food through their hands.
That is Billy's dream.
Exactly what I thought. Hannah's boyfriend is an amazing chef, and I was thinking if he could just not.
It's not his job. He's not actually a chef, but he loves to cook.
But yeah, so that's one of them. Another one is to be able to heal. Anyway, I just thought this is really interesting, and I'm about 200 pages into it now, and I cannot stop thinking about it. I need to know about the characters. I need to know what's gonna happen, and the writing of the characters is beautiful. It's so good.
Aww.
And I'm very impressed because I have to say it's not my usual genre, and I'm totally in love with the book.
Really?
Yeah, really in love with it. I'm going to keep raving about it because I really love it. So halfway through, and it's up there. It's top tier.
Love that.
What are you reading?
That sounded very accusatory.
What are you reading, Hannah? Tell me now.
So I've started reading The School for Good Mothers by Jessamine Chan. Really enjoying it so far. Only 20 pages in.
Mm-hmm.
That is probably one of my most anticipated releases of this year.
Yeah.
I've been so excited for it. Mainly because Pandora Sykes might have mentioned it a few times. So.
Didn't you get it off her subscription box?
I did. Pandora's Books.
Mm.
So yeah, I got it from her subscription box, which is amazing. And as soon as I saw that they were sending those out, I was like, sorry, I need this book. I need it from Pandora herself. But yeah, I've been so excited for this book to come out and so excited to finally read it. So it's kind of like a dystopian book. So it's kind of if mothers were judged for their parenting and they were... I mean, it does happen. So it's a really clever concept, but it's if they're sent to a school where they learn to be better mothers.
Yeah,
and
I think it's like if you do something wrong, like...
But it can be like from the smallest thing.
Yeah.
So it can be like if they're seen shouting at the child in the street to like full-blown abuse. Like there's no kind of... It is, they're punished either way.
Oh, it's interesting. Really interesting.
Yeah. So I'm excited to read more of that. I've literally read 20 pages last night and already I'm like sucked in. So that's always a good sign.
It's got a lovely cover. It's got a gorgeous front cover. But you know what I really hate about it?
What?
The spine. Because it's blue.
What's wrong with blue?
No, don't. Right, because the front cover is gorgeous. It's like pastely pinks with yellow. It's absolutely gorgeous. And then you've got this like thumping massive blue spine on it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the spine is what people see on your shelf. Up your spine game.
Spine game.
That's all I'm saying.
Oh, God. Now, on to today's episode. We are going to be talking about the books that have shaped us. The first question that we have today is, what is a book that started you reading? So, Lydia, what is a book that started you reading?
Oh, my goodness. Now, this is a hard one for me because... and I will put a little disclaimer in because I am going to mention Harry Potter and my love for Harry Potter growing up. However, I understand that whenever you now mention Harry Potter, unfortunately, there is quite a big dark cloud that comes with it because of J.K. Rowling and her, frankly, disgusting comments about trans people. For me, and I know for you, I speak for you, Hannah, trans rights are human rights and we are allies and we stand by our trans friends, family and all of you out there who might be struggling with your identity or might be, you know, struggling like I have with kind of looking at a series that you really adored and looking at the author and realising that perhaps they aren't the person that you thought they were in terms of her views. So I'm not going to be talking about her today.
No. Absolutely not.
She's not worth our time. But I just wanted to make sure that before I go into how much I love this, which I do, that everybody understands where we stand on the matter. Yeah. And of course that your rights matter to us and everything that we...
And we in no way stand by any comments, any harmful comments that she's made so far. We don't stand by any of them.
No. And this is not publicity for her. This is not me asking you to go out and buy a book.
It's just us getting nostalgic about books that we grew up reading, you know, books that we've enjoyed throughout our lives. Yeah. That's the main focus of today's episode.
Exactly.
So you kind of couldn't have spoken about books we grew up on without mentioning Harry Potter.
It would have been remiss of me to say that didn't make a massive impact in my life. But now that we're 20 years on from the publication and things have come to light, I do not promote that author at all.
No.
So just a disclaimer for you, and if you want to skip this bit, that's absolutely fine. If you don't want to hear us talking about Harry Potter, it'll just be for this first little bit, and then you can find out the rest of our book picks.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the book that really got me into reading was Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. I was gifted it for Christmas off my mum's friend, who was a big reader. It was as it was published, like it had a beautiful bow on it and all this stuff. And I hadn't really read a full novel. I'd read like books, like bits and bobs, but I'd never gone and got a full novel and sat down and read it. And I must have been, I mean, I can't have been that old, 7, 8, something like that. And I'd read, you know, your regular fare of children's books. But this was the first novel I ever sat down and read. And I remember reading the first chapter of Mr. and Mrs. Dursley at number 4 Privet Drive. We're proud to say that they were perfectly normal, thank you very much. And just being like, what is this? And being encapsulated by the world. Oh my goodness, did it take me places. And it was the gateway for me to be like, well, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
What else is there? And luckily my mum, who was an avid reader, was like, well, if you like that, she's like, oh, if you like that, I've got these books that you'll like. And it led me into like Tolkien, so reading like Lord of the Rings and things like that when I was younger. It just opened up a load of doors for me, and it made me realise that reading thicker novel. I mean, it's less than 200 pages long, Philosopher's Stone.
Yeah.
But reading a thicker novel is not something to be scared of.
No.
And also the themes in it, you know.
We say that now. If I see a thick novel on my shelf, I'm like,
Right.
that's going to be sat there for a good 6 months.
I know, I've got the love songs of W.E.B. Dubois on my shelf, and I'm like, when will I have the courage to put you down on my shelf?
Charlie on Bookstagram is raving about that.
Everyone loves it. But yeah, so Harry Potter, it changed my life. The character of Hermione Granger really made me realise how important education was, and how it wasn't something to be ashamed of to be bookish and to love having your nose in a book, and not really to be like cool. I never really struggled with bullying or anything like that in school, but I did struggle with the fact that I was a bit different. I did have my head in a book. I was sort of ashamed of that for a while, and then as soon as I got to grips with the fact that, you know what, Hermione Granger is unapologetically smart and funny, and you know, she's an icon for me of like, don't apologise for being a nerd, don't apologise for loving what you love, doing what you do, and yeah, I absolutely adore that whole series, really. And it means a heck of a lot to me. It brings a lot of emotions back for me when I look back on my reading life, and I think, you know what, if I hadn't have picked up Philosopher's Stone, would I ever have got into reading the same way that I did? Would I ever have thought that I could read a book, like a full big book like that, as a 7-year-old?
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I owe a lot to Harry Potter. And it does have a special place in my heart still.
Oh, I love that.
But Hannah, I need to know what your childhood book was, please.
So I don't know what age exactly I started reading, but I know that my Nana Val, God love her, she is a huge reader herself and always encouraged me to read. And there's loads of pictures of me sat on her knee while she's reading to me. Aww. And yeah, she was just always encouraging books. And we have this wonderful family tradition at Christmas called Fairy on the Christmas Tree. And we've been doing that since I was a child, since my nana was a child. She was doing that with her family. And it's basically the fairy on top of the Christmas tree. You get a small Christmas tree on a little stand in the middle of the living room, and you all hold hands and walk around it and sing this song.
Hannah, oh my goodness, this is too cute.
And then when the song ends, each time the song ends, whoever's facing the fairy gets to take their book from underneath the tree. But she would always buy a book for each person, so you would always have your own book under the tree. It wasn't like you were fighting over one or but yeah, she always encouraged like a love for reading. So yeah, I loved that. So that's just a really little cute insight into my bookish childhood. But I really enjoyed kind of reflecting back on this, because for me, Harry Potter was a big part of my childhood as well. I loved reading the series, felt completely transported to this like magical world. But I would never go for that now. No. And back then I was like obsessed with it. Couldn't wait for the films to come out. Loved all the books. So that was a big part of my childhood. But I do remember reading The Magic Faraway Tree by Enid Blyton. So it's really weird that I didn't go for fantasy books now, because a lot of the books from my childhood seem to be like, I used to kind of head towards that for escapism. And I used to really love like immersing myself in these exciting worlds, and I was fully envisioning myself climbing up this tree and going into this magical land. Yeah, I just really enjoyed those stories.
I do think though that it's the same as playing with children, right? When you play a game with a child, you are basically just fantasizing. You're just playing. You just let's play shopkeepers. That is the best way for a child to learn. Yeah. You can sit them in front of a book and say, this is how you do it, or this is what you do. But if you play shopkeepers, they'll know when you go in a shop how to do it. Yeah. And it's the same with fantasy fiction when you're a child. So it teaches you a lot more than you think, because like Magic Faraway Tree, it's still teaching you about significant lessons about how to deal with certain things in a brilliantly inventive way. Yeah. But I think that's what appeals to kids, is because they don't know they're learning. So you don't know that you're craving to learn about conflict or conflict resolution as a child. But these books, like Narnia books, things like that, C.S. Lewis, he does it really well. You know, you don't realise how much it's teaching you as a child, I think.
Yeah. I would say that was probably the book that started me reading. Would probably... I mean, there's probably all sorts that you picked up as a child, but that's the one I distinctly remember.
Yeah, again, I don't think these choices are, like, solid. I think they could change on a daily basis. Like, if you asked me tomorrow, I'd probably be like, oh, yeah, but Elmer by David McKee really made a massive impact on me as a child, because I loved him.
Also, my memory is shocking, so this really tested my memory.
It's difficult. Also, like, Each Peach, Pear, Plum, I used to love that when I was really little.
That sounds really... familiar.
Yeah, so it was Each Peach, Pear, Plum, I spy Tom Thumb. Tom Thumb in the cupboard, I spy Mother Hubbard. And it was it's a little nursery rhyme book.
Yes.
And I think it's by Janet and Alan Ahlburg, I think is how you say it. Their name. But yeah, and that is really indicative of my childhood, that rhyme. To be able to still be able to recite it nearly 30 years later. If you were to ask me tomorrow, it would probably change. But I think that, you have to pick and carry on. That's what you have to do. You have to put your stake in the ground and be like, you know what, I'm going to be strict with myself today.
I was strict because I had several choices, but I just went with that because Lydia did tell me before the podcast that she would tell me off if I picked more than one. So.
Let's just... She swans in with a list. With a list of 40,000 books that she's whittled it down to. And I've slaved away trying to get one book for each question. And you come in with choices.
Oh, I don't really have an answer for you.
No. Well, right, should we move on then?
I think so.
Right. Okay, so now we're growing up.
Yes.
We are discovering ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We're going through the ridiculously horrific time of teenagerdom. What would you call it? Teenagerdom?
Teenage doom.
Adolescence, basically. I just don't want to use that word. But, the doom of the teenage years.
Yeah.
So, Hannah, can you tell me a book that I would be able to get from your teenage bookshelf?
So my teenage bookshelf, now I'm thinking early teens. I'm not thinking like 16, 17. I'm thinking like 13, 14. You would always find Jackie Wilson on my bookshelf, always without fail.
She's a queen.
I don't even know if there's any books of hers that I didn't read. Haven't read her later books. I know she's just released Baby Love, is it? Which I think is her first adult novel.
Ooh, I'll have to give that a check out, because I've not... No, I didn't know that.
I definitely want to read
it. I've not kept in touch with her since growing up.
And she also, I think there's one called Love, Frankie, which was more recent. But yeah, when I was a teenager, there were so many of her books that I just adored. Her books, I don't know what it is about them. You know, she was exploring quite dark themes, but in a really accessible way for younger readers. And, you know, there was so much on family dynamics and relationships and friendship, and, you know, a lot of things that affect you in your formative years that you kind of don't realise. And it was, I feel like it really helped a lot of younger readers to read her stuff, as it kind of helped you navigate confusing things that might be happening in your childhood and your teenage years that you don't really know how to deal with. Yeah. You know, emotional things like, you know, like your parents divorcing, or if you come from kind of non-traditional
like
family,
a blended
maybe.
Family.
Yeah, like a blended family or a non-traditional family. Like, I don't know how you would really word it, but she was kind of like the, not older friend, but like the...
I think it's like your older sister, like, who gives you kind of like... I know it sounds like weird, but, you know, like, shows you like what to do with like a panty liner, like this so in.
Yeah.
You know, and like, you know, teaches you little things. Like, it's nothing graphic. It's nothing that's gonna like. It's nothing that you would have to think twice about giving a 13-year-old child. You know, like, you know what I mean? Don't be like scanning through it. Yeah. But again, like, I read Girls in Love.
Yeah, I was about to talk about that.
Yeah, and it's one of those books that kind of like teaches you a lot in a small space of time.
So that was the book, the series that I was going to speak about.
Oh, amazing.
So some of her books, so there was like Midnight and Clean Break and Lola Rose, and those are the ones that spring to mind. But there were some of her books that I was bullied in school, and a lot of those books kind of helped me navigate that because some of these characters were being bullied, or they were navigating friendships, or, you know, like petty fallouts with their friends. You know, and I really struggled to navigate that when I was younger. So I felt like a lot of her earlier books really helped me with that. And I also struggled in my earlier years with like my parents splitting up, and I felt like her books were often talking about like parents divorcing and having to be in a blended family. And yeah, I just felt really kind of supported by her. You know, even I did go to a book signings when I was younger, and I adored her, but I couldn't quite put into words to her when meeting her when I was little, like how much her work had helped me.
Yeah.
You know, it really helped me navigate some of those tougher times. And the Girls in Love series, I wanted to speak about that because I thought that was a great series for introducing younger readers to like sex and sexuality and navigating this kind of coming of age and not knowing what you wanted and trying to like, you know, find yourself a little bit in those spaces, and kind of like identity and friendship and female friendship. And it kind of confronted so many different things that were like, you know, big themes to a young reader like myself. And yeah, I just adored that series.
I think it answers a lot of questions that you didn't know you needed the answers to.
Exactly.
So you start, you know, if you're, I don't know, prepubescent or 13 or 14, just starting to discover what it is to be a woman, or to be yourself, whatever you identify as. You don't know the questions to ask. I didn't know what questions to ask, you know, and my mum and my dad, very open people. Yeah. So I could ask them anything, but if you don't know what to ask.
Exactly, yeah.
Whereas these books kind of unlocked a lot of that, kind of like, oh, so that's what that is. Yeah. And okay, that feeling's normal, and this feeling's normal. And she's great like that.
Yeah, and I think what you're taught in school when you're talking about like sex and relationships, and you're being
taught
about it. Put the
condom on the cucumber.
Like it's all very like logistical, isn't it? Whereas I felt like her books were teaching me those things from an emotional perspective. Yeah. And
which some would argue is probably more important.
Yeah.
Than whether
definitely,
or not, you know,
definitely.
You know, the anatomy of the inside of a vagina. Couldn't really care less, to be honest. But you know.
But honestly, I could wax lyrical about Jackie Wilson for... Look, Jackie Wilson, like I know her. Jaqueline Wilson.
You do know her.
And I remember being really obsessed with Nick Sharratt's illustrations.
Absolutely beautiful.
Stunning. I used to adore them, and I used to look forward to getting the books just to look at the illustrations.
They are gorgeous.
And I used to be so frustrated that I couldn't draw like that.
I am jealous of all illustrators.
Yeah.
My one of my closest friends is really, really good at drawing, and I hate her for it. And she knows it. So I'm like...
Lydia, what is a book that I would find on your bookshelf as a teenager?
Well, not quite as light as yours.
Okay. Let's roll with it.
I'd say I was a bit older. So right. I've probably pitched it a bit older than you.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I think for me, when I look back on my teenage years, there was a lot of like rereading.
Okay.
Rereading a lot of comfort stuff because I had quite a difficult time in high school. So I left high school and was home tutored. So I did a heck of a lot of like reading in my spare time, and so I did a lot of rereading for comfort to help with anxiety. I know a lot of people do that to help with their anxieties, reread and rewatch old programs. Yeah. But I'd say that the one book that I took a chance on was We Need to Talk About Kevin by Lionel Shriver.
Wow, how old were you when you read that?
16.
Really?
Yeah, I was young. I bought it because I was a little bit, not obsessed, but really intrigued and interested in like the Columbine disaster, the massacre there, and school shootings, mass shootings, and what motivated these kids to do it. You know, I wasn't in a school at the time, so it was kind of all very foreign to me. Yeah. So I was kind of perplexed. I wanted to know more about it, and I'd heard a lot about we need to talk about Kevin, and that it was about a massacre in a school.
I didn't know that's what it was about.
Yeah, so...
I thought it was just about the mother-son dynamic.
No, so... And it doesn't give anything away because it's given away at the very start of the book.
Right.
But basically, Kevin, the child, he's a teenager, he goes into school and he is a perpetrator of a massacre in his school.
Okay.
And the rest of the book is basically looking back on her life and her relationship, the mother's relationship with Kevin. And it's a lot about nature and nurture and what causes young men, mostly young men, to harm other people at school.
Right.
And the culture behind it and the situation behind it. And it was fascinating. I was very into dark stuff when I was a teenager. And I wasn't...
You? Dark?
I know, me. Dark? What? I'm practically a comedy. But yeah, and I think it's because my mum let me. She was like, you know what, if you're interested in it, read it, you know. Yeah. And there was never any censorship in my house.
Right.
So it's kind of like,
which is great.
If you feel like you're ready, read it. But if it's starting to freak you out or scare you or make you feel down, you stop.
Yeah.
And go pick up something light. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and that was the best thing for me because it tackles huge issues, massive issues, depression and empathy and violence and grief, and it's super interesting. Now again, Lionel Shriver is perhaps not the most neutral of authors. She has some views of her own that are somewhat problematic in my view, but I do love the way that she writes characters as unlikable. And it was the first time I had ever read a book like that. I'd never read a book where the characters were not likable, and there were very few redeeming features to most of them.
Right.
And it was sort of like a coming of age book for me because I was like, wow, this is not your Jacqueline Wilson. This is not. I'm not safe in this book. No one's protected me from the harsh realities of life in this book, and I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it, and I actually bought a new copy of it about a year ago, and it's on my shelf because I lost it when I moved house. Furious. And I'm intending to reread it, and it'll be like over 10 years later.
I'm gonna have to get this now.
Yeah, I'm gonna reread it. We should buddy read in the reread, because I really want to see how my perspective has changed on the mother, and on her relationship now that I'm older, and I have a different perspective on it.
And now that you are a mother,
and now that I am a mother, so I feel like that'll hopefully spin some of the stuff, and I'll get more out of it because I remember really loving it. And as well, back then I was very against having children. I wasn't going to have any.
Really?
I wasn't going to have any. I mean, I was very opinionated at 16. I mean, I still am. But yeah, I had my life set out, and children were not a part of it. So for me, We Need to Talk About Kevin was the book on my bookshelf as a teenager that was tabbed and talked about and referenced.
See, this is so funny because I had written down, when you told me to narrow it down, I was like, okay, I'm just going to speak about Jacqueline Wilson. But my teenage years in terms of reading feel quite split, because my early teenage years, like, I guess I would have been about maybe 9 when I started reading Jackie Wilson. That feels like an appropriate age.
Yeah.
Maybe from like 9 until I was like 14, I think I was still dabbling in Jackie Wilson. But there was probably like a period from maybe when I was like 15 onwards, where I became totally enamoured by Jodi Picoult and adored her books. And one that I was going to speak about was actually 19 Minutes, which is about a school shooting as well.
Oh, wow, really?
And I think Jodi Picoult's the first time, because a lot of Jackie Wilson's books are told from first person perspective, are they?
Yeah.
It's very much like you're, kind of suctioned into that one person's life and you're looking at it from their perspective. Whereas Jodi Picoult's books, she's an incredible writer, and we've spoken about this on the podcast before, about how she does multiple perspectives so well.
Yeah.
And she will take a really dramatic event and tell it from the perspective of all the different people involved. So whether that's, say if it was a school shooting, maybe it'd be one of the students in the school that's trapped in a room at the time, maybe a teacher that's trying to look after her students, maybe the shooter themselves. And it really gets you to question like your kind of morals and how you might judge a person until you're inside their head and then you'll actually see from their perspective that actually they're not a bad person. It's something that's happened to them in their life that's maybe traumatized them and caused them to be this person. And Jodi Picoult was really great at making me look at a different perspective and see a different perspective and kind of understand people and kind of stop before judging people, you know, not judging a book by its cover. And I thought Jodi Picoult was really great for doing that. And yeah, I can't kind of mention my teenage reading years without talking about Jodi Picoult. Because I kind of made the jump from Jaqueline Wilson, who explored these dark topics, but in a kind of supportive way to young readers, to Jodi Picoult, who was exploring these things in a way that I kind of hadn't been exposed to before. But yeah, she's an amazing writer.
I find it fascinating.
I never knew that We Need to Talk About Kevin was about a school shooting.
Well, it's
that's why I want to read it even more now.
It's a great kind of. I always feel like using any adjectives when you're trying to describe something so horrific is always a bit tricky, but it's a really interesting look at the subject.
It sounds powerful.
It really is. It really is. And you know what? Trigger warnings to the hilt, because it's a difficult read. But I've always been the type of reader that kind of pushes trigger warnings to the side. And then usually regrets it halfway through, and I'm like, oh gosh. But yeah, it's definitely worth a read.
So my next question, Lydia, what is a book that changed your perspective on something?
I have picked for this category My Life on the Road by Gloria Steinem.
Nice.
So I don't know if you're familiar with Gloria Steinem, but she is a kind of prolific feminist who helped to pioneer the feminism movement in America throughout the 60s, 70s and 80s. And still to this day does amazing work. And I have to say, I will only pick this book up because Emma Watson picked it for her Our Shared Shelf project, which is basically just like a let's all read together book club. And so she picked this book, and I was like, oh, I'm going to read anything she suggests. So I was like, yeah, it was this and Alice Walker's The Colour Purple. It was like some absolutely amazing choices. But this was the first one, and I have always considered myself a feminist. I don't think it's a word you should be afraid to use. No. You know, I think feminism for me includes everybody. And so I've always been a feminist, but I didn't really know how to articulate it, because I was always just like, I think that we should be equal, and that was it. And then I read this book and about all of the amazing things that Gloria Steinem and her, I think you could call them collaborators, colleagues, everyone was kind of pushing people like Bell Hooks on what they were doing to define feminism for the new generation. And I could not believe I felt so sheltered from what had happened. I had no idea that women had had such a struggle. I knew it. People say, oh, you know, burning the bras and, you know, chucking herself under a horse, and this is the feminism you learn in school. But you don't learn about Indigenous people's lack of equality. You don't learn about things like trans rights and about women in the workplace and about the strides that people like Steinem have made for women. And it was like someone got a key and opened my head and just went, there you go. Here's a world. Here's an entire world that you need to learn about immediately. And I was like, oh my goodness. And that was it then. I was like, this is it. Like, get me everything that is related to feminism. I just went to Waterstones and bought a load of feminism books and was like, I need to read all these. And it's not in itself, because it's a memoir. Right. It's not particularly the most groundbreaking memoir that there is. You know, it's a great memoir. I really enjoyed it. But it was more the opening me up to the concepts of feminism and what you can do, because she's an activist. So she's very much like, what can you do in your house? What can you do in your workplace? What can you start standing up for? And I was like, well, you know, I do that. And then I was like, oh, no, I don't. No, I don't speak up when somebody calls me love, or when I see someone have a sexist comment thrown at them, I don't say anything. I just sit there. At the time I did. Now, you try and get it past me. You try. But it's because I just accepted it as the norm. And she said, don't.
Yeah.
And she opened me up to so many new authors, especially like bell hooks. And I thought, you know what? I'm so glad that I've read this book because it taught me how to be a better feminist and how to be a better ally. So completely changed my perspective on what it was to be a woman and how to be a woman and what womanhood meant to me and what it might mean to other people.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm very grateful for that.
I love that.
Very grateful. But what did you pick that you would say changed your perspective?
So I chose Happy Fat by Sofie Hagan.
Oh, wow.
That was one of our book club picks. So I used to run a book club from 2020 until the start of this year, wasn't it?
January we finished, I think.
So I started that during the first lockdown.
Saved my life.
And I would choose a book each month and we'd read it and then we would all jump on Zoom to chat about it. And I'd chosen Happy Fat by Sofie Hagan. It's kind of difficult to encourage people to read non-fiction. I feel like people are more accepting of fiction books.
100%. I am. I know that.
And people kind of turn their nose up at non-fiction reads. But this, to me, felt like a really important book to read. And it taught me so much. Now, I am so interested in any kind of writing that explores bodies and body image and, you know, anything kind of along those lines. I really struggled with eating disorders when I was younger. There's so many books that would have really helped me at the time that I never kind of had access to. And I really wish that I'd read that book back then. It's just such an incredible book and it taught me so much on fatness and living in a fat body and how fat has always been used as an insult and how it's such a loaded term and how fat people are wanting to reclaim that term and, you know, how fat people kind of have to navigate the world and kind of the fat phobia that goes on and, you know, the shaming of fat people and fat bodies. And it just kind of, it blew my mind that there was so much that I'd kind of not understood. And, you know, there's kind of so much in our language that is fat phobic that I hadn't considered that would have really impacted me as a child and would impact anyone on the way we perceive ourselves, on the way we perceive our bodies, on the way we perceive food and eating and the way we look at other people and their bodies, and the way we judge the way others eat and the way others' bodies look. And it just really opened up my mind. And I really can't recommend this book enough. It's such an amazing book. And I think Sofie Hagan is just brilliant at teaching these things in a really accessible way, in a really nuanced way, in a really funny way.
I was going to say, she's really funny about it as well. Like, that's what you need, especially with something, a subject so heavy as this. Like, it's such a tricky thing to tackle, and to be able to do it with a smile. Yeah, she's
so funny.
Yeah.
And I loved all of her anecdotes and the way she would kind of bring in statistics, but also be, you know, speaking about a situation that had happened between her and her granddad as a child.
Yeah, it's always relatable. It was never like, and here's, I mean, because I've read my fair share of non-fiction in my time, and some dense stuff where it's like, here's my dissertation on this subject, and I'm like, I do not want to read it.
But this just wasn't dense at all, was it?
No, it was anecdotal, it was funny, it was also really kind of honest. Yeah. Like, to a point where I was like, wow, you were, this is like, I hate the word brave. I hate it in terms of, because it's always brought out with fat people. Let me tell you, oh, she's so brave. She's so brave for wearing that. But it was brave and bold of her to be able to come out and say, you know what, this is how this language makes me feel.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so good. So good to read.
Because there's so much hate and abuse that fat people receive online. You know, we see that a lot with, you know, now models and campaigns that are using models now. They're diversifying the models that they're using, and we're seeing more, you know, fat bodies in the media and on social media and stuff. And the amount of hate and abuse that they get is just horrendous.
And also, I feel like a lot of the time when you look at the fat influencers that are on Instagram, these people are not looking to be selling products because of the way they look. They're looking to be positive about themselves and to be something that someone can look at. And a lot of the time these campaigns are doing it to sell you a product because it's the thing to do at the minute. And you got to think, what are their motivations and stuff. And I think that Sofie really opened my eyes to be a little bit more cynical about stuff like that. And why are they doing it? And is it to forward these principles, or is it because they want more people to buy deodorant? Reading that book really helped me to
it really made critical. It really made me check myself though. You know, like, am I being accepting of people in other bodies? Because we've always been taught to kind of, I don't know, we live in such a fat-phobic society that there's things that you do and kind of opinions that float around in your head that don't even belong to you. They've just been something that society's taught you.
Oh, massively, yeah.
And it just really made me check myself and kind of, you know, look at the language that I'm using and, like, look at the language that the people are using and really question it.
You have to retrain your brain. It's literally like rewiring your brain because we have been taught, especially as women, we've been taught to internalize that shame. So, like, you can love a fat person and hate yourself for being fat. And that doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
No.
But you do. You do, because you've got all this shit. It's a very shameful thing, fatness. And it shouldn't be at all. Why? Because you've got a bit of extra fat cells in your body. Why has that got any influence on you whatsoever? So yeah, it was a great book to discover, to sort of go, wow. And there are a few things in there that I found difficult. Like, she gets you to do like exercises where you like hug your body.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, no, I can't do that. And that's me. And I thought that was really interesting of her to do stuff like, you look at yourself and you think, oh, why do I feel uncomfortable now? So yeah, it was great. It was really good. So I'm glad you picked that, actually. I'm really glad.
Because it was kind of like, you know, here's me learning to accept other people. And yet I can't even accept myself and my own body.
And you practice what you preach kind of thing, isn't it?
You know, we're constantly taught to shrink ourselves, especially as women. So yeah, it really made me question that.
So, Hannah, moving on, I would like to know the book that you've chosen that instantly reminds you of something.
So,
I feel like you're already laughing. It's going to make me laugh.
So I've actually chosen. Well, I wrote a different one down. I picked two.
Oh, here we go. Picking two again.
Sorry,
Cheating
but I'm not going to do it. So because I've already talked about book club, I'm not going to talk about book club. So a book that I'm going to speak about is Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. And I had a visceral kind of reaction to this book. So it's kind of like Shonda Rhimes' memoir, but it's kind of a year in her life.
For those of us that don't know who Shonda Rhimes is.
Shonda Rhimes is an incredible writer. She's the screenwriter of Grey's Anatomy and of Scandal, and she has Shondaland, which is her production company. So Shondaland have done Bridgerton.
Amazing.
And countless other incredible TV dramas and TV series. She's amazing. But Grey's Anatomy is like one of my favourite series of all time. I'm just obsessed. It's a medical series in America, and it's just incredible. If you've not watched Grey's Anatomy yet, where have you been? Please go and watch it.
Where have you been?
But yeah, that is Shonda Rhimes in a nutshell. She's a writer, and an amazing one at that. And because I'm such a fan of Grey's Anatomy, I was like, I have to read a book. And this book is kind of like a year in her life, and it's about it. So the book is stemmed from a really small conversation that had a huge impact on her. and she was having a conversation in the kitchen with her sister, and she was talking to her sister about an event she'd been invited to, and she was going to turn it down, and her sister kind of said, like, you always say no to things. She got quite like uppity about it and was like, excuse me, like, I don't always say no to things. Like, I go to loads of things, I can be social, blah, blah, blah. Like, and her sister kind of challenged her on it and was like, actually, no, like, you don't say yes to enough things. So the year of yes is about her year of saying yes to various projects and challenging herself to go out and be sociable and to take advantage of these opportunities that were being thrown her way that she'd always kind of turned down because of fear. And it really challenged, you know, the way I would perceive myself, and how a lot of the time you say no to things because of fear and because you think that you're not deserving of something, or because it can be for a variety of reasons. But I read this book when I was on holiday with my ex-boyfriend, and I wasn't happy in the relationship at this point. We'd gone away, and I wasn't happy at all, but I wasn't admitting it to myself, and I felt some kind of guilt about being in a relationship and not just trying to make it work. And I was like, you know, I've just graduated uni, I should be, you know, moving in with my boyfriend, I should be, you know, ticking all these like kind of huge life moments off my list. And, you know, I had all these expectations of what life was supposed to look like. And I felt like I was letting myself down. I was scared about letting him down, of letting our friends and family down if I kind of left the relationship. And reading this book, I had like a visceral reaction to it, and I was like, I can't be in this relationship anymore, I'm not happy. Why am I restricting myself because I'm so afraid of like the outcome of me leaving this relationship when I know in myself I'm not happy anymore? And I remember finishing this book and being like, I can't be with him anymore. You're off. Get out. See ya. And I sat down and had a conversation with him, and we were due to be moving in together. We were trying to find a place together, and I sat down with him one night and was like, I don't want to live with you. You know, I don't want to live with you. I think we need to live separately and see if this is going to work. And, you know, eventually it didn't work out for me and him. And I genuinely have this book to thank, because I had such a visceral reaction to this book. That I was like, why am I trying to shrink myself? And, you know, I'm not taking advantage of like opportunities because I'm so afraid of like the outcome of things, and I was really living in fear when there was no reason for me to. And that book just really pushed me to
wow, that's amazing. The power of books.
And that book's always kind of stayed on my mind, and I was really reluctant to speak about this because obviously it's always kind of awkward talking about like ex-partners and things like that. But yeah, that's kind of the book that I really wanted to talk about.
I love it.
Because I adore Shonda Rhimes. I love her writing style. I think she's one of the best screenwriters of our time, and this book was just amazing. It's one of my favourite ever books.
Wow.
But yeah, it changed my life.
I feel like I need to get my hands on this book.
You do. I'm going to get my hands on this book
on,
for
Stephen.
you.
Maybe not. Like I'm off.
Yeah. Bye, Stephen.
Good on holiday.
But Lydia,
yes.
What is a book that instantly reminds you of something?
Well, I don't think I could beat that, because that's a heck of a story. But I am going to introduce the first man of our of the podcast.
I wonder who this is going to be. No idea who he's about to talk
you know
about.
who I'm going to say, don't you? I know you're all sat there at home like, oh, here she comes. It's Stephen King. I couldn't not include him, could I? It'd be absolute sacrilege. So I chose the novel The Stand by Stephen King.
Nice.
And it is because it instantly reminds me of my mum and of the love of reading.
Yeah.
And how brilliant reading a really good book can be. It's one of those novels that, like, if you pitch it to people, they're like, oh. Because it is about a pandemic. It is a bit end of the worldy.
Yeah.
It's a long novel. When you are not familiar with Stephen King, oh my gosh, can he waffle? He's a waffler. A born waffler. And I love that about his writing. I could listen to him talk about like a Twinkie for 16 pages. And he will. And it's just the unabridged version of The Stand is like 1,000 pages long. It's huge. And every single bit of it is fantastic. You get into this world, he transports you, and you live it. It's so visceral. It's so kind of, the way that he describes...
You can't see Lydia, but her eyes are completely like lit up.
I've had a very tired weekend, and let me tell you, I've woken up talking about Stephen King. But yeah, so the way he talks about how like virus spreads, he talks about like it going on money and from hand to hand and stuff. And there is a scene where a character hands a dollar bill over, and he says he hands the dollar bill over loaded with death, and it's just like, you know how to tease me. And there's a scene at the beginning, it doesn't give much away, where a car is coming down the road and it's a bit out of control, and there's this guy at a diner and he's got, you know, gas pumps outside of his thing, and he's looking and he sees this car and it's kind of swerving, and he says, turn off the pumps tap, which, you know, turn it off because this guy's gonna crash into us. And when my mum was passing away, we were talking about the book, and she quoted that to me, and I was like, how? I mean, my mum had been through a lot of trauma, and she had really real difficulty remembering things, and the fact that she remembered that quote and she quoted it to incredible. Me, because we were talking about the start of the book, because I brought a copy of the book to her so we could read it together. Yeah. She couldn't read anymore. I was like, oh, it's getting to this bit, and she said it before I said it, and this is the power of the human brain. Yeah. When you love a novel.
And the power of books.
And the power of books. It stays with you. Let me tell you, it stays with you till the last minute, because it did with her. Mm-hmm. And it was just wonderful. Like, she was like, turn off the pump tap. And I was like, yes. So it will always have a special place in my heart, always. And so, yeah, so when I read that book, it reminds me of her, which is a lovely thing. Yeah. It's such a positive thing. Yes. And it's a great book. It's gritty. It's violent. It's got all the stuff I love in it. And, you know, a great, fabulous cast of characters. And, like, talks about people that you wouldn't think you'd empathise with, but, you know, think of all the prisoners left in prisons when everyone dies. What happens to them? They're locked in. And, you know, talks about the perspective of these people. And it's fascinating. It's brilliant. And so thank you, Mum, for bringing that into my life. I've not reread it since she's passed, because I think it would be too emotional. Yeah. But I have got a new copy of it. As a buddy read. I think it would be lovely. Because if I didn't mention it as well, she'd have killed me, because she'd have been like, can you make sure you mention Stephen King at every opportunity? So if you can come banging on about it, it's not me, it's my mother. So it's very personal, it's very emotional for me to talk about, but if you're looking for a really good kind of end of the world novel, pick that up. Don't be scared of its size. Just give it a go. Give it a couple of chapters. Give it a chance. I swear you'll love it. You will.
Love that. Now on to the big dogs. It's happening. Lydia, what is your ultimate recommendation?
My ultimate recommendation. Now, let me tell you, this list is as long as my arm. But I have decided that to go with just my instinct. What is the first thing I think of when you ask me that question? Rather than going, oh, but I could choose this, and oh, but I could choose this. What's the first thing that comes to my head? That is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. Won't come as a surprise to people. But it really is. And when I was thinking about it, I was thinking actually there's a heck of a lot of similarities between Hamnet and The Stand by Stephen King.
Oh, okay.
So there is a full sequence in Hamnet of a virus travelling from one place and coming across, obviously it's the plague, and coming across and reaching the victim in the book. And that is entirely reminiscent of Stephen King's writing in The Stand and how viruses travel and stuff, and what I loved about that book. But ultimately, it's a novel about grief, and it's a novel about loss and how to navigate loss. Mm-hmm. And I read it before my mum passed away, but I feel like it was really a great novel to have read to prepare me for what was going to happen. Yeah. which it sounds weird with a fictional book. You think, well,
No.
but honestly, it really did. I was like, okay, you've just got to listen to your body. You've got to listen to what your body needs when something like this happens. And the way that Agnes, who is the mother of the family, the way that she is written, and the way that she deals with grief and childbirth as well. I just had my second baby when I read it. It was just phenomenal. I
love that.
And I just adored it. So yeah, if you ask me for my ultimate rec, I'm gonna say that, because it's a gorgeous book. There is, and this is a big disclaimer, but there is a death of a child in it, so it's very, very difficult in places. But ultimately, it's not about the sadness of that situation. It's about everything else. And some beautiful nature writing in it as well. If you love a bit of like scenes from a bush, then Maggie O'Farrell is your woman. But yeah, I think that's my favourite. But Hannah, if I asked you the same question, what would you tell me?
There are so many books that sprung to mind when I did this, and I found it really, really difficult to narrow it down, because there's so many amazing books that I want to recommend.
I found it really... I just went with my first thing.
Okay, I'm just going to say the one that I was intending to say, which is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood.
What a choice.
Pulling out the big guns. I only read this at the start of 2020.
Oh, wow.
Like in the January of 2020, before chaos hit.
You know what? I think I read it about the same time.
Yeah,
how crazy is that?
I found it so powerful and so moving and like gut-wrenching, and you know, it's not an easy read by any means. It's really not. It really makes you reflect on the dangers of the way we vote. Yeah,
how quickly things can turn.
Because when I read it, Donald Trump was in power, and it's just kind of really unnerving to think, you know, the wrong person in power. We've had this conversation on the podcast before, but you know, with the wrong person in power, anything can happen.
Yeah, I think as well it was for me the subtle way it kind of insidiously came.
Yeah.
1 minute you can't use your bank account.
Yeah, but I think this is why I've been so excited for the School for Good Mothers, because that's kind of going in a similar direction.
Yeah.
You know, it's a dystopian book, but this is kind of exploring how it starts off with, I'm at the start of the book now, so it's this woman, and she is so exhausted from being like a mother, and she has split custody with her ex-husband, and the child is sick and will not sleep, and she's just so exhausted, and she leaves the house without the child. She goes to get a coffee because she needs a breather. And the child is taken by the police, and she's not allowed custody whilst they kind of investigate the fact that she left her child. And then it calls into question, you know, whether she's a good mother, whether she should be in control of this child.
What a great concept.
Yeah. And they then create this School for Good Mothers, and it goes down the route of re-educating mothers, and it just kind of has similar vibes to The Handmaid's Tale for me.
Yeah.
I'm so interested in dystopians where they go down that route of the way society tries to control women, because I think there's such a balancing act, even now, of it could go either way at any time.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
you know, there's still so much control over women in parts of the world, and there's so many males that are in power in the world, and you know, we're seeing that play out in America, you know, with kind of abortion laws, and you know, in Ireland as well.
Trans rights as well.
Trans rights, and you know, abortion laws, and you know, there's so many different kind of laws that are brought in that it is trying to control, you know,
huge sections of society.
Massively, and it really, really unnerved me reading The Handmaid's Tale, because I was like, oh, like, we're kind of so naive at times, you know, when you think that you're moving through the world and you're safe, but actually at any given time that could change.
It's taken away. That's what I find fascinating about dystopian fiction, is when the everyman, every woman, is having to do something so extraordinary out of their life. Yeah. It's just completely ridiculous, but I found it really interesting. Have you read The Testaments yet?
I have, yeah.
Yeah,
I think The Handmaid's Tale is my favourite.
I think it's my favourite as well.
It's just such a powerful book.
I
think that's why it's like my ultimate recommendation, because I just don't understand how somebody wouldn't love it.
I also think that with The Handmaid's Tale, it's another great example of the way that novels are pioneering for women, because in every dystopian TV series or film, there's always a male protagonist.
Yeah.
And the male protagonist is always the guy with the gun, and he saves everyone, and then maybe he dies heroically at the end, and then there's the solo female girl left at the end, you know, like, oh, I've been saved. Whereas with these, the women are the people that are fighting.
Yeah.
In whatever ways they can.
Yeah.
Because basically the first people that get oppressed are women, are people that are considered other in society. And it's interesting to see that.
Yeah.
And the fact that a lot of authors are writing from the woman's perspective now. And basically Margaret Atwood pioneered the way to do that, I think.
Yeah.
You know, she said, I'm going to write it, everyone follow.
Yeah.
And luckily people have.
Yeah. It's just such an incredible book. Now, moving on to, I hope you enjoyed our little chat about the books that have shaped us.
I could do it all day.
But we're going to move on now to questions. So, I've got a couple of questions for you, Lyd.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
So, how do you decide on who your favourite writers are? What is the criteria for that? I think it's so difficult, because some people would say you can't just read one book by a writer and decide that's your favourite writer, but I would disagree.
I would disagree, because I've only ever read one Maggie O'Farrell, and that was Hamnet, and I love her.
Yeah.
Okay. Just saying
Don't
that.
out
Right, I would say the way that I pick a favourite author is if I read the book and love it.
Yeah.
And then that is then compounded by, if I see another of their books, do I buy it immediately? Do I go, I need their next book, or I need their backlist book? Yeah. So with Maggie O'Farrell, every time I go in a charity shop and I see her backlist books, I'm like, I'll get that, because I know I will like it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that for me is, if the first novel I read of an author is brilliant and I really, really like it, I am guaranteed to try their next novel.
Yeah.
So people like Rupi Kaur, I read Milk and Honey and was like, oh, this is amazing. So I've now read everything she's written.
Yeah.
And I am a bit of a collector. So if, like, I really enjoyed Kazuo Ishiguro's Remains of the Day. So then I immediately had to go out and buy 14 different books by him. So yeah, if I'm excited by them, I will then go and get the rest of their books or try and seek them out somehow. So for me, to meet the criteria for favourite author, I've got to have read at least 2 of your books. If not, I'm really excited for the next one you're going to write. If you're like a debut author, like Julia Armfield, I was really excited about her. So immediately had to go and buy her short story collection, because I was like, yes.
So just as a little segue from what you were just saying, my other question was, who wouldn't have to work hard? Who wouldn't have to work hard to sell you their next book?
Well, Stephen King is my auto-buy author. I'm sorry, but yes. I will literally, I don't know why I don't just call him up and say, Stephen, send me them, you know. So yeah, he's my auto-buy author. I think for me, like, most recently, Hanya Yanagihara, anything that she writes is going to be purchased by me. And I've not loved everything she's written. I didn't adore The People in the Trees, but I know that I'm fascinated by the way she writes. What about you? Like, have you got like an author you're like, I have to get that?
So,
other than Meg Mason, obviously.
That's obviously who I was going to mention. So writers I've only read one book from that would happily get their next book are like Meg Mason. I've just finished reading Catherine Heine and adored it, would happily get her next book. Bernardine Evaristo, I've only read Girl, Woman, Other. Yeah. Kate Elizabeth Russell, who wrote My Dark Vanessa, would instantly get her next book. Meg Nolan, who wrote Acts of Desperation. Douglas Stewart, obviously, I've just finished Shuggy Bane. We bought Young Mungo. They wouldn't have to work hard to get me to buy the next book. Tayari Jones, Elif Shafak.
Oh, Elif. Oh.
Yeah.
You see, you're so much more prepared than I am. I'm like, Stephen King.
But then, like, my favourite writers are, like, Sally Rooney. Like, I've read 3 of her books now. I think she can very easily go into my favourite category. There's nothing that I've not loved of hers.
Yeah.
Nora Ephron, adore her.
Nora.
Yeah, I love Nora. You know, I've watched a documentary by her, which is Everything is Copy, which is incredible. Adored that. Adore, like, When Harry Met Sally, so, like, her films and her books, just everything about her. She's amazing. Dolly Alderton, loved The High-Low, love her books, you know, loved everything I know about love. Have I mentioned that's been adapted?
Right. Oh, here we go. Was that the fiction mention?
It was. Loved Ghosts by her. She would just be a massive, like, I feel like when I'm reading Dolly Alderton, I feel like I'm being, or listening to her on something, I feel like I'm being wrapped up in a warm blanket.
I love that.
I feel really soothed by her words and her speaking and just anything that she does. I'm just like instantly need.
Yeah.
So she wouldn't have to work hard to get me to.
No, not at all.
Definitely not. Zadie Smith, I love her as a person. I really like her books. I wouldn't say her books are my favourite, but I would happily read her back catalogue because I love her. I've read, was it White Teeth? And On Beauty. I've read both of those. Loved them, thought they were amazing. She's just ridiculously intelligent. She's probably one of the most intelligent people on this earth right now. Love listening to any interviews that she does. But yeah, she's brilliant, and I would say she's my favourite writer, just her as a person. I just adore her.
Wow, that's interesting.
But Hanya, obviously, I have to give her a mention because To Paradise was just a work of art. But yeah, I don't think I really have an actual criteria for writers.
No, I think it's a tricky one, isn't it?
For favourite writers, I mean.
You either love them. I think you know when you love a writer.
Yeah.
You know when you're excited about
and when you're gutted when you finish their book.
Oh, especially if they're like Hanya Yanagihara or Donna Tartt, who releases one book every 10 years. And you're like, please just speed it up for me because everything you write is gold.
Come on, Donna, wrap it up, hon.
Please, come on. I think sometimes as well, though, the amount of time that people take, you can see the quality in it. You know, Douglas Stewart said that he took 10 years to write Sugar Bane. Yeah. And you're like, I can see that.
Yeah, for sure.
I can see it's brilliant.
For sure. Now, on to the questions that we've been asked. We have at Meg in a book, who we adore dearly.
Oh, we love Meg.
Which book do you wish you had as a teenager?
Oh, here she comes with a curveball. You know what? I think for me, something like Queenie.
Amazing.
By Candice Carty-Williams, because the way that she talks about women and sex and the issues surrounding that, I could have really have done with.
Yeah.
Because I felt a bit, as a teenager, a little bit sheltered from a lot of the sort of mechanics of sex and the reality of sex, because a lot of the time what we learn about sex is from TV.
Yeah.
Which is all simulation, and you know, and pornography is no better. So I think that a book like that, where it really is about the honesty of sex, I loved. And also again around the issues of race. I come from a very bland white community. Let me tell you, it's white as white. Like there's nothing. Where I grew up, it was not multicultural whatsoever. And I think that reading books that depict black characters and characters of colour is very important as a teenager to help you understand the world around you. If it's not out your front door, you need something to help you navigate that. So yeah, I think I would have loved a book like that on my shelf.
Amazing.
What about you?
So I'm thinking The Places I've Cried in Public by Holly Bourne, which is a YA novel, and I didn't realise it was a YA until I read it. But I really, really wish I'd read that as a teenager, because I was in an abusive relationship from the ages of 16 to 19, and it was my first relationship, and there was so much that happened in that relationship that was like deeply traumatic, and has stayed with me until I'm now the age of 27. So it's stayed with me for a very long time. And The Places I've Cried in Public is about a young girl who's in an abusive relationship, and it's emotionally abusive and it's sexually abusive, and she doesn't understand how to navigate this whole thing, and it's just such an incredible book, and I really, really wish I'd had access to that when I was younger.
Wow.
Because there's so much that we're not taught about consent and about what's right and what's wrong in a relationship, and about how we deserve to be treated, and the things that we should accept and the things that we shouldn't accept, and being able to speak up for yourself and being able to know when something's wrong. And there was so much that I found that book really, really powerful. Obviously read up on the trigger warnings for it. I think, you know, from hearing me speak about it, you'll kind of understand what direction it kind of goes in. But I felt really impacted by that book when I read it, and I only read it, I think, last year. And I was like, God, I wish I'd had this when I was younger.
Yeah.
Because it maybe would have helped me to navigate that relationship better, or helped me to understand that the way he was treating me wasn't right. Yeah. But yeah, it's a really powerful book, and I would really recommend it.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I think that another book for me that I think really details consent really well is Normal People by Sally Rooney, and how Connell treats Marianne in that. That's another. It's kind of like, look at what it should be.
Yeah. But and I mean, on the subject of consent, if we're talking about recommendations that explore consent, I would obviously recommend Michaela Cole's I May Destroy You, which should still be on BBC iPlayer, but it's an incredible series.
I think it is. I saw it the other day.
And it explores, you know, sex and consent and relationships, and how consent has various forms. And I also wish I'd watched that when I was younger. Yeah. Now I need to speed along because this is supposed to be a mini-sode, and we've been talking for almost an hour and a half.
Okay, it's your fault. Oh yeah.
It's not my fault, but okay. So final question is from @ReadingWithHendrix. Desert Island, book, snack, item of clothing, only one of each. Go.
Oh my goodness, right. The Stand, Stephen King, nice and long. Right. You'll have forgotten the start by the time you get to the end. Snack, do you want anything too salty on a desert island, do you? Do you want anything chocolatey or melt?
You're really thinking this through.
I am. I think my snack would be, but I'm going to go for Skittles.
Oh, okay.
Big bag of Skittles. I'm writing it down so I can remember when I'm on actual desert island days. Book, snack, what was it?
Item of clothing.
Oh, clothing. PJs.
Love it.
Like a nightie.
Love it.
Because there has to be one item. PJs, or even though I'm on my own in the desert, but short enough that I'm cool. And then I could like roll the straps down so I can sunbathe.
Love it.
What about you, Hannah?
I'm surprising myself, but I'm going to say To Paradise by Hanya Yanagihara.
Because you'll be in paradise.
Yeah. But because it's split into 3 sections, and there's so many characters that I get to spend time with, and it's kind of a bit cheeky because I get 3 genres in one, really.
Oh, I like it. She's thinking ahead.
So, you know, and it's technically 3 books. I mean, she calls it book 1, book 2, book 3, but it's sort of one book. It's really long, so I'd get to spend loads of time on it, and I think you'd get something different out of it each time you read it. Snack. It's not food, but I want an endless supply of iced coffee.
I'm not sure that counts as a snack.
Well, I'm taking an endless supply of iced coffee, so it's going to count. And also, I want that was a good job I paused because I almost forgot about my love for mini cheddars.
Oh my goodness, could you imagine?
I would want an endless supply of mini cheddars.
You'd have to have mini cheddars. And can I just specify, for when I am on the island, make sure it's the sour Skittles and not the regular Skittles. And don't give me none of your shellless. They're weird. Original green sours. Thank you.
Stop it. I hate my clothing. Why am I wearing anything other than a bikini?
Oh, I was just about to say, you better not be naked, because if we're stuck on it together...
I want a bikini. I want to be chilling in my bikini. It's going to be boiling.
I know, but it's like wearing a bra. You don't want to be wearing a bra.
Well, if you get your bikini underneath it, then I want like a nice long baggy top.
All right, then.
Something that would like, you know, like a really baggy one that would kind of like almost like a t-shirt dress.
Right, okay.
One of them that I can just put over my bikini.
Yeah.
Because you can sleep in that, but then also you can wander around in it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Thinking ahead, guys. So yeah, that's what I would go.
I
take it very seriously. Now I think quickly we can do some recommendations.
Oh, yes, let's do some quick ones.
So, Lydia, what have you been enjoying recently?
Okay, so I have had a few sleepless nights recently with a teething child. So I have managed to watch the whole of It's a Sin again.
Have you?
And I cannot tell you how much I sobbed
the
entire way through. It is the most beautiful piece of work.
It's incredible.
Oh my goodness, I haven't got words.
Anything Russell T Davies touches is gold.
Please don't, because you know what? If he ever listened, or if I ever met him, I would cry. I was actually fantasising in the shower this morning about meeting him and what I would say, and I almost cried to myself in the shower.
It's been an emotional week.
It's been an emotional week, very tired. But he's just absolutely fantastic. He gives actors space, room to do what they need to do with the characters. And yeah, it is unbelievable. The story he can take you on in 5 hours. Beautiful. So, for fans, but yeah, it's amazing. And also, a recent film that I watched was Boiling Point with Stephen Graham.
So good. Now, can I just say, from someone that worked in hospitality for 10 years, I only left hospitality a couple of months ago, and it is a perfect and accurate representation of the shit that you are dealing with on a daily basis.
Listen, the guy at table 7 deserved a knife in the throat.
100%.
And this is why I can't work in hospitality, and why I had to work behind the scenes, because I do not have the patience to not smack someone over the head with a bottle.
Oh my God.
But anyway, so it's a story about a chef, his restaurant, and just the average night. And
it was done in one take.
Done seamlessly in one take, and it is fundamentally brilliant.
Yeah.
It's great acting, great characterization, fantastic dialogue. None of it's overly dramatic.
Yeah.
None of it feels forced. So atmospheric, so claustrophobic. It's all set in the kitchen and the dining area. And you know what? It just kept me going. I was just like, this is so good.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Because I watched, I think it's called Burnt with Bradley Cooper in.
Yeah.
And Sienna Miller. And I didn't think much of that in terms of like trying to encapsulate what it is to be a chef and a working kitchen and things. I felt like this did it much better.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's on Netflix, along with It's a Sin. So you can find both of them on Netflix at the minute, and both of them well worth a watch. And also Boiling Point is only about an hour and a half long, so it's a really short watch. Yeah. What about you, Hannah? Tell me your recommendations.
So my recommendation, I love the Literary Fiction podcast, and while I've been working from home this week, I've been trying to go through their back catalogue, and I have been going through the Hilo back catalogue, Comfort Listen, and I heard them recommend an episode on literary fiction with Sally Rooney.
Oh.
And so I went back and listened to that, and it's amazing. It's from when Normal People was first published.
Oh, wow.
So they recorded it in a Waterstones in Leeds.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing. It was just hearing her, and I'm on my second rewatch of Normal People, which I kind of watch an episode and then come back to like a month later or something. I've read through the scripts of Normal People, which are actually on BBC. It's on their script library, which is great. You've got access to that. I've read through the scripts. I've obviously read the book. I'm just a massive, massive fan. And it was just so interesting hearing her speak about Normal People and about her writing process for it and about creating those characters, and just kind of having the knowledge of how much she is blown up as a writer now.
Yeah.
When at the time the podcast was recorded, she wasn't actually as well known at all.
Yeah.
She'd obviously done her debut, which was Conversations with Friends. But I feel like Normal People really like propelled her into like the spotlight, and everyone kind of grew this obsession with her work and her. So it was really interesting to listen to her talk from back then, and from how like Conversations with Friends had been received, and about her process of writing Normal People. It's just such a great listen. Would really recommend that. And also a book I've been reading recently, which I finished last night, is Standard Deviation by Catherine Heine. It's my first Catherine Heine. She is fucking hilarious. She's so brilliant. I have never annotated a book this much. So Standard Deviation is about a marriage between Graham and Audra, and it's kind of told from Graham's perspective, and it's about navigating marriage, and it touches a lot on infidelity because their marriage is a result of their affair. But it's kind of not told from the time of their affair. It's told from when they're married and a few years into their marriage, and they've got a 10-year-old son called Matthew. And so I'm just going to read this paragraph. I don't know if I've got time to do it, but I'm doing it anyway. So this is a conversation between the two of them and gives you an insight into what their marriage is like. What if your very last words were, I think maybe I left my curling iron on? When Matthew first started going to elementary school, I would make sure that the very last thing I said to him every morning was, I will always love you, so that if something happened to me, that would be the last thing he remembered me saying. But that sort of fell by the wayside, and now when I drop him off, I say, don't tell me you forgot your backpack again, or jump out quickly before someone honks. In general, I feel my standards of mothering have declined over the years. Doesn't it seem like I would have gotten better after so much practice? Like, by this point, I should just be able to snap my fingers and puff Matthew's dressed and fed and loved and secure. But instead, it's more like Downton Abbey, and I had a couple of very strong seasons there in the beginning, and now I'm cutting corners like crazy. Downton Abbey, what was she talking about?
I love that.
And it's just, Audra is one of the funniest characters I've ever read. She's just hilarious, and she has these like monologues like this, and then you're looking at it from Graham's perspective, so he's just like, what is she talking about?
What planet
Why
is she on?
Yeah, like but it's just such a brilliant book.
Right.
Loved it so much, and it really took me by surprise. I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did, and it's got the same kind of wit as Nora Ephron. So for any kind of Ephron fans out there, I would really recommend this book. I loved it so much.
Well, I think if we've not filled your brain now with full-on recommendations,
Jesus Christ, we've been speaking for 1 hour and 40 minutes.
We do apologise. We
are going to edit this massively. But that is all we've got time for today. So my cat is about to jump up on us. Rhubarb, please chill. If you have enjoyed the podcast, please do share it. Please do rate, review and subscribe to us, as that boosts us in the charts. Please do share us with your friends and recommend us, as this would massively help us reach other bookends. And if you would like to DM us about any books that you would like us to read for future podcasts, please DM us at Pair of Bookends Pod. And that is all we've got time for today. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.